The Salisbury East infill precinct is located about 20 kilometres north of Adelaide CBD, just to the side of the Salisbury Activity Centre, and it fronts the Little Parra River, which is a seasonal ephemeral stream. The precinct is in good walking distance to train station and shops and council area, and it was selected as it's already undergoing some infill development, unplanned. It's seen as having great potential to house more people, as there's a number of undeveloped blocks, and in the process improve the amenity and the connectivity of this important realm that's in close connection to the river and the town centre. The development that's happening there is, as is typical business as usual, car-based. It's got a lot of concrete surfaces. This is the type of development that's currently being built by the market in this precinct. Narrow side-by-side row housing with street frontages dominated by car vehicle crossovers, very small courtyards to let light into rooms, and very small backyards. There's a large percentage of paved or impermeable surfaces and very low amenity for the spaces inside the dwellings. So the study area, as I said, looks at these, we selected 4 representative sites that were real sites and likely to be developed in the opinion of the council and ourselves. And we use these to test some principles of what a water sensitive alternative might look like. In site number 1, it's currently, like a market garden site. It's linked directly to the Little Parra River Reserve. You can see the olive groves, the creek line here. There's remnant olive groves and a very large canopy mature cypress trees that we were keen to retain. One of the principles of our water sensitive approach is to retain all existing significant trees and make sure we can leave good deep soil zones to plant new trees to increase the canopy cover across the suburb. So we did some comparison hypothetical studies where we just continued the existing surrounding old style suburbia into this block and found we could get 13 dwellings at this density. We also applied that previous example I showed you of the row housing that's currently being built to the site and found we could get 42 dwellings of that side-by-side type. And in our water sensitive mixed type development, we increased that yield to 69 dwellings, keeping all buildings at 2 to 3 stories. And we were able to do this while achieving pedestrian connectivity from Fendon Road down to the River Reserve, and importantly, keeping all the existing trees on the site, the big mature cypress pine and the olive grove as part of new public realm, and increasing the ability for additional trees to be planted. The different colours on this diagram represent different building heights. Orange is 1 story, red is 2 stories, and purple is 3 stories. The cross section looks something like this. So the existing olive grove in the middle, the River Reserve on the left-hand side and Fendon Road on the right-hand side. There was walk-up apartments of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom mix against the road, the olive grove, and then a series of row houses or courtyard houses, sort of 50% building and 50% garden, with vehicle parking integrated as we step down towards the river. The buildings were sited to retain the trees and get good passive solar sunlight into each living space, and to make sure the buildings don't overshadow their neighbours. The overall built form, it's just a schematic massing diagram, looks something like this, with the olive grove in the middle here, the main pedestrian public linkage through to the public realm, and the courtyards and spaces between dwellings shown. One of the principles of the water-sensitive approach to urban design is that each new development should not only work for itself, but should give something back to the public realm, increase connectivity, better tree canopy cover, more public realm space that's accessible to more people, and improve the streetscape and the public realm frontage. The second example is a series of very long, large blocks that run between a suburban street here and the river public realm at their backyards. Currently, there's no connection between, and the public realm is fronted by a series of blank fences. We looked at applying similar building types of courtyard dwellings and walk-up low-level apartments that step down and enable to retain existing trees on the site and increase a number of new pedestrian walkways, allowing people to have more access to the river space and for that river space to be more useful and more active with more passive surveillance and activation by people. So the overall tree canopy increases, the density increases, and the public realm connectivity increases in the process of infill development. The cross-section of that one looks something like this. Again, 2 to 3 story dwellings with large courtyards between, existing and new canopy trees, low-level apartment buildings on the edges that step down to meet lower-level neighbours so that they're not imposing from the view of the existing neighbours, and lots of space between the new dwellings with connectivity through into the page between the street and the public realm. The housing types that were used in these studies are drawn from a publication that we've been putting together over the past 2 years called the Infill Typologies Catalogue. And these are not so much preset designs as spatial ensembles that that demonstrate how these principles of high quality infill can actually be achieved within typical Australian suburban blocks in real situations. It's divided into a number of scales and sections, as this contents page shows. It covers individual dwellings, such as courtyard dwellings, terraces, and so on, low-rise apartment buildings, and the streets, lanes, and public spaces that connect those buildings within a precinct. The catalogue works with the IRP3 study to compare the performance of what might be called old style or traditional suburbs from the 1950s to the 1970s with what's currently happening in the market today with largely unplanned backyard infill and dual occupancies, and compares that to an imagined improved future with more density, more diversity, and better hydrological performance and better environmental performance, lower heat, and so on. In very basic terms, the water sensitive models achieve a higher density but a similar unbuilt and pervious fraction to the original suburbs. So we can increase the density and improve the performance quite dramatically from the current infill practice, which is shown in the centre. One example that demonstrates some of the principles is a building type that was developed for the Salisbury East precinct. We call here the Salisbury Terrace. It's a 2-story row house type on allotment sizes that work with that site number 1. And it's a courtyard type dwelling that has a number of water sensitive and flexible features. What's important from our water sensitive approach is that the external spaces are given as much thought and prominence as the internal spaces. So the green spaces in the bottom diagram are the dark green ones are the deep root zones where trees can have enough space to develop mature height with a reasonable canopy. And the pale green is raised external terraces. We've also got covered external space. And the blue diagram shows the water surfaces. So we've got water capture on the roofs in pale blue, water storage in tanks shown in the darker blue, and water infiltration into the natural impermeable soil shown in the middle blue. All of those elements of open space types and water capture, storage and treatment types are important to be thought of as the total system. So this dwelling type has a range of simple, flexible rooms that are all have good access to quality outdoor space, and think about the amenity of the streetscape, the amenity of the internal space, and the scale relationships from neighbour to neighbour. The plan shows some principles that underlie all the examples that are in the infill typologies catalogue at different scales. They are things like car parking should be provided, but all car spaces should also be multi-use and able to be used in flexible ways, such if the car was removed or parked in the street, or if you didn't need a car. So the garage here is a covered outdoor space that links directly to the courtyard garden. It's able to have the garage door left open and create a good visual connection from the garden to the street. The garden takes up half the width of the block, and the living spaces are directly accessible to a large, generous courtyard space that's usable functionally and also usable for growing trees and providing more canopy shade. All the rooms upstairs are large bedrooms that could be subdivided into smaller children's spaces, or they could be opened up and joined together into a studio workspace. Service areas are compact and located directly above each other for ease of plumbing. And there's a ground floor room facing the street that could be a third bedroom or a study or a work from home space with its own entrance. So a simple functional layout that's got lots of inbuilt flexibility and all the key relationships for good passive design, good streetscape are included. The street profile, these are the sort of home office rooms and the covered garage spaces linking through to courtyards. Encourages the idea that the garage door might be left open, but when the garage door is closed, the design is such that some light still comes through and it's not a blank garage door. There's terraces above to animate the streetscape. The rear spaces are also developed in a way that the buildings don't overshadow their neighbours, and there's enough space between buildings left, in this case 4.5 metres, to have a generous courtyard space able to grow a proper tree, and it connects directly to the covered garage space and bicycle storage and so on in the distance.